Hello, and welcome to the Testimony Tag Team Podcast. I'm Charlie, your host, and I'm here with my beautiful wife and tag team partner, Valerie.
Thank you, and hello, everyone. Despite the name, this podcast is not about professional wrestling.
That's correct. It's a podcast about glorifying God through stories from the lives of his followers.
We're here for real stories, conversations, and a few laughs. So let's share a metaphorical cup of coffee,
Or any other enjoyable beverage.
as we tag in our next guest.
Before we get to today's episode, we're going to talk about what this word testimony means.
It's our belief that every follower of God has a story of how God has impacted their life, something that we can share that brings glory to God and encouragement to others.
Sometimes that story is specific to when you were saved. Sometimes it's a season that God helped you through, or sometimes it can be God growing you through everyday challenges.
So what we're saying is, as a Christian, you definitely have a story to share. And we're ready to tag you in here on the Testimony Tag Team podcast. Reach out to us at testimonytagteam@gmail.com or click the link in the podcast notes to connect with us about sharing your story.
Today's guest on the Testimony Tag Team podcast is Pastor Mike Willis. Hello. Hey, Mike, how you doing today?
Doing good. I've been in traffic all day coming from a conference, but it's good
yeah.
to be here with you. Thanks for
in Orlando, right?
having me on. Yeah, I-4 that'll test your holiness.
You're right about that, for sure. 27 is not much better, though, these
That's
days.
true. That's true.
Okay, well, Mike is a pastor at High Point Church, our church. He's our pastor. So we're grateful for Mike to come on to be our guest on today's podcast. So welcome.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so first up is our segment, Tag Your It segment. So, Mike, you can see here, obviously, this giant spinning wheel that we will...
Why do you keep trying to convince the audience of this?
It's a giant wheel. Picture Price is Right.
We're in a tiny four-walled room that's gray.
No.
Yeah, as long as we don't all end up bankrupt, we're okay.
All right, so Mike's going to spin the wheel,
Oh.
or I'm going to spin the wheel.
I think you should make a sound effect for this.
That's a great idea, actually.
I want to hear it. What's your best wheel sound?
It's just a bunch of clicking, isn't it?
Yeah, there's no sound. All right, so here's the question. What's a prayer that you prayed that didn't age well? So if there's a prayer that you had at any point in your life that did not age well.
It didn't age well?
Yeah.
What do you mean by
Maybe
that?
it's embarrassing in some way. Maybe there's a particular thing you hoped would happen. And you can take it however you want to in this. You can make it, mean whatever you want, I suppose. But you think for a second and see if you could come up with something that might qualify.
The first thing that came to my mind is times when I've bargained with God. If you do this, I will do that. And that never works out well. I remember years ago, I was really early on. I mean, I grew up in a Christian home, but I had finally gotten serious about it. Your faith changes when it has to be yours and not just your parents. Mm-hmm. And so I'm in my mid-20s. I'm a husband. I'm a father at that point, and I wanted my wife to get this job really bad that she had been applied for. She interviewed for. The interview went well. It was down to her and another person. And I remember saying, God, if you give her this job, I will do this. And I don't even remember what this was. And, she didn't get the job. And imagine that, right? You bargain with God and it doesn't work out in your favor usually. So that's what came to my mind is just about when you try to convince God that how he should answer your prayer. That's what I would say.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's funny. We try to manipulate God to do what we want, right?
Yeah.
And we can't see.
Doesn't usually work out well.
No, exactly. Oh, I could definitely relate to that. Let's see if I could think of.
I'm stumped on this one.
I'm a little stumped on this one too. I didn't.
I went first to help you guys.
Yeah, that was helpful, Mike.
This is our question.
Yeah.
We should know how to answer this.
I don't pre-screen these, so you can now. This is genuine. Let's see. So I agree with Mike. I think there's a lot of times where I've prayed for things that, as I've gotten older, I realized that it would have been a terrible idea for me to have that thing. Like, I don't know if I specifically prayed for winning the lottery, but it's something you kind of fantasize about at some point, right? When it gets up to like the $1 billion jackpot or something, you're like, well, what if I won that? And I don't know, that probably would be the worst thing for you, that. So I'd say something like that. I've probably prayed for something silly like, obscene wealth or something at some point in my life, and I just know that if I was honest with myself, it wouldn't go well.
I don't think I have that good of an imagination to be praying for off the wall stuff. I don't know.
Maybe just got a perfect prayer life.
No, it's not perfect. I guess maybe, I don't know if I specifically prayed it or not, but I think whenever I was younger, I used to really hope, maybe not for quite fame, but I really like to be recognized for like singing well or something like that. But I can't say that I ever prayed to be famous, and I definitely would not want to be famous now.
So maybe that was something that you might have
thought
you wanted.
Maybe.
But, okay. So maybe
and it died quickly.
Maybe you recognize that was a no good prayer even at that time.
Sure, we'll go with that.
Okay. All right. So Mike, let's start with a little bit about yourself, So where'd you grow up? And we'll start with that.
Yeah, that's a loaded question because my dad was in the Air Force. So I was born in Alabama. I lived there, and then we were transferred to a base in Charleston, South Carolina, and then we went to Germany for 4 years. That's where I went to middle school. Then we came to Florida, and he retired from the Air Force, which is where I finished high school. Was here in Florida, planned to stay here until I got called into ministry, and then we left the sunny, secure Florida to go up to frigid, cold Michigan and spent a year up there doing an internship with a church. And then we went to Columbus, Ohio and Virginia, and now I've been in this area, Polk County, Florida, for 20 years. So where I'm from, that's a loaded question.
That's
There's
a big one.
Lots of answers for that.
A lot of bouncing around, I see now.
Yeah.
How was that like growing up? Was that difficult to make those kind of adjustments, or?
The thing is, when you're in the military, you don't get a choice. The government says you're going here, and that's where you're going. And so you just kind of learn to adapt with that. And I grew up, that was the only life I knew. And so you move every 3, 4, 5 years, and then you meet all new people, sometimes in another country who have done the very same thing. And so you all kind of just adapt to that. It's a little hard to start over like that. So when we moved to Florida, he had 1 year left in the Air Force, and so he retired, and then he got a job working at the Space Center because we were over in Brevard County, Melbourne area. And so I had asked my parents, can I just stay at this high school and finish at the same school? And so they allowed me to do that. We had to get a waiver and all those things, but it was the best thing for me. And then when I meet people now who have lived in the same area their whole life, it's fascinating. It's mind-boggling to me. I can't even understand what that would be like. Yeah. We've got one guy here who's a leader at the church that he lived in one house, and then he bought the house next door so that his parents could move in there.
Wow.
And he's only been in these 2 houses his whole life.
Wow.
It's fascinating to talk with him. And I've lived in, I think, 33 places in 53 years, something like that.
Wow.
So, but I've been in this area for 21 years now, which is the longest I've ever lived anywhere. So,
wow, okay.
How good are you at packing up for moving as a result?
Well, considering we just did this 6 months ago, not very good at all. We sold our house and built another one. And man, I can't believe that my wife and I survived that. At one point, we looked at each other one time and we were just exhausted from packing and cleaning and getting the house ready to sell. And I looked at her and said, I never want to do this again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm not good at all.
Yeah.
Again, with the military, they send packers and movers. And
that's true.
Yeah, that's also helpful. But yeah, I'm not very good at it all. Don't want to do it again. Still holding on to that.
All right. So you live in the Lake Wales area.
Yes.
And tell us a little about home life, your family currently.
Yeah. So currently we have my wife and I, Atlanta, we've been married going on 9 years now, been together 10, and we have 6 kids. We're a blended family. We each lost our previous spouse to cancer. We each had 3 kids. So now we have 6, and they are ages 32, 25, 25, 23, 23. And then pray for us. We have a 15-year-old girl. She's great, though. I love her, and I never had girls before. We only had sons. So this is a whole new world for me. And I love the relationship that I have with her. But God's been really good to us. We've been through a lot of grief. Our kids have been through a lot of grief. And he just really dramatically, powerfully single-handedly brought Lana and I together, and we're so grateful for that, for the relationship we have and the kids we have. Now we only have two left in the home. Griffin is 23, and he'll probably be moving out at some point this year, and then Collins will be going to college in 3 years. So it's an empty nester, and we've never had that. So it'll be interesting. But we just moved into a new house, and at least once a day we look at each other and say, I love our house, which is good considering I said we never want to move again. So, but we're very thankful. It's, a couple minutes from the church, and that's been really great to be close here, and just so grateful for what God's done.
Yeah, your youngest is the same age as my oldest. They kind of grew up in Babson Park.
That's right.
Elementary together, and so that's kind of fun.
Yeah.
But they're kind of the same age.
This is that was my second go around through Babson Park.
Yeah.
I had the first round of kids, and now this one.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. All right. So let's see. Next question, just a question I think we're going to ask all our guests. You're our first actually official guest.
Wow, I'm honored.
Yeah. But this is, I think, a question that's important to us, and so we're going to. So,
is
Mike,
it important or is it a problem?
Yeah. Now, the longer you say it, the more scared I get.
Yeah, am I building it up too much? So the question is, Mike, how addicted to coffee are you?
I think I'm on like cup 4 or 5 for today. So
See, that's not that bad. That's not that bad.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, I drink black coffee hot. That's the only way I'll drink it. I can go through a pot a day if I want to. I could go through more than that. And I have to switch to decaf after 5 because then I'm up all night and my wife wants to kill me. But I love it. If I'm just sitting, it doesn't matter how hot or cold it is outside, I can drink hot coffee, and I enjoy the taste of it. Yeah. So
I aspire to be a black coffee drinker.
Yeah.
I'm not.
We ask this as addicts ourselves because we come from the same. As you know, you officiated our wedding.
Yeah.
Which
at a coffee shop.
At a coffee shop.
Yeah.
So.
My first and only time I've done that. But it was great.
So all right. So now we can get to the.
All right.
All right. So Mike, how would you describe your relationship with God growing up?
My mom raised my brother and I in church. We were there every Sunday night, every Wednesday night. I remember crawling under the pews during prayer meeting, doing anything I can to get outside on the playground instead. I remember that, and it was drilled into me. And my dad didn't go to church. He wasn't a Christian until later on in life. I was in ministry. And so she faithfully raised us there. She made sure that we were taught the Bible from a very early age. She didn't give us the choice that we want to go to church or not, because you don't get a choice in our home. You just go. And I'm thankful for that she instilled that in me. And so you kind of learn who Jesus is, who God is, what he has done, what he can do from those Bible stories. Mm-hmm. And I remember them on like the flannel graphs, and there was no, projectors and DVDs and all of that. So I remember the flannel graphs is how those Bible stories came to life as a kid. But then I got into teenage years, and then I started to stray a little bit. And then somewhere around age 23, that's when I really decided to get serious. I think I was sharing this earlier. I had, a wife and a baby, and you got to kind of re-examine where your life is going at that point. So growing up, I always knew who God was. I learned about Jesus from a young age. I got saved when I was age 8, got baptized that year. But there wasn't a lot of people teaching me what it means to grow in him. Mm-hmm. And, I don't know that I would have been listening if somebody was trying to either. So I don't want to, it's not the fault of the teacher themselves as well, because sometimes you take a role in that. But I just think that's part of it. I was taught a lot of it, but at some point that faith had to become mine. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened there.
Okay. So would you say your relationship with him was more of an activity than a relationship growing up? Is that a fair way to say it? Or
I think so. I don't know if I've ever thought of it that way as an activity, but that's an interesting way of thinking about it. Just because it was something that's what we did. Mm-hmm. On Sunday, we went to church. Mm-hmm. On Wednesday night, we went to church. Mm-hmm. On Sunday night, we went back, those kinds of things. It was part of the routine. And that's not a bad thing per se. as long as you understand the reason for going. And so I don't know that I embraced the relationship aspect until I was an adult and really needed that. But the activity part, that's really interesting to think of it that way.
Okay.
I think one thing Charlie and I have kind of talked around, because I was raised in the church too. And I think activity is a good way to describe it. That's what you did. You went to church
Exactly.
Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, wherever else you're needed, you plug in. But the relationship aspect, I don't think was necessarily there, but I was saved at a young age. And one of the things I think we've talked about is like, were we really saved at that young age? Or did the salvation come at the older age when we more understood what the relationship was? I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I think I don't ever remember my mom or any teachers in my upbringing teaching me what it meant to have a relationship with him.
Mm-hmm.
He certainly saved me from my sins. I remember being taught that and having that almost drilled into me. But I don't know that anybody ever sat me down and explained the relationship part. This is what you do with someone you have a relationship with on a daily basis. I don't ever remember someone teaching me how to have a devotional time or how to memorize scripture or some of those things. But my mom did. I remember seeing her over in the chair over in the corner, and she had a journal and she had a Bible, and, she read that faithfully. But I don't really know that anybody taught me that as far as having the relationship aspect of it.
Sounds like your mom was very, influential, a good example, and kind of showed you, lived out her faith in a way that you could model, I guess. And it sounds like she kind of had, at least, that was one area. You mentioned you moved around a lot, but it sounds like the church thing was pretty consistent.
Oh, yeah.
How would you say that helped you as a kid, that consistency and that routine of that?
Well, I think that's just it, is that it kept me in a place where I was always hearing biblical preaching and being taught, prayer and music and some of those things that I carried with me. So even in those years when I strayed, there still was this conviction of the Holy Spirit. I knew I wasn't living my life right.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, there was a period of time where I got saved every Sunday, and I'm jokingly saying that, but there's a little bit of truth to that. Every week when our pastor would, give a response time or an altar call or an invitation, I knew I wasn't living right. And so I was praying hard and confessing those sins then, but it wouldn't be, maybe the next day or even that evening, and I'm back to living however I was living and not in a way that I should have been. So I think that's a part of it, that you just, you learn some of those things that stuck with me. And even when I did stray, even when I wasn't living right, I still was feeling the conviction of the Lord on that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big thing for people to understand, that he does that because he loves you. That's him pursuing you, wanting to spend more time with you, wanting that relationship that we talked about.
Yeah, I think, I've talked about in the past on our first episode, we talked about how I had a similar kind of a period where I was, I was raised in the church, but I had a time in my early adult life where I was, messing around with the world, and I kind of like what you're describing. Like, I don't think I ever let go of God, or probably more likely he never let go of me.
Right.
And so I did always kind of feel I knew that I was doing wrong, but I was pursuing these worldly things anyways, and led me to a lot of, like, during that time of just questioning my salvation a lot. And looking back at it now, I think God was kind of working in me all along, and so that's kind of the conclusion I've come to, and that was that I think I was initially saved at a young age, but that I kind of have been growing into it throughout that whole time, and God's just been working in me. And so even in the time of rebellion.
Yeah, and I think that's part of why it was so important that my mom kept us in church, because there certainly were lots of times of questioning, especially when you look at some of the things that we went through. I had a brother that died when I was 5 years old, and it affected my parents deeply. Well, of course, now that I understand trauma and grief and have experienced some of that myself, I can see that. And I just think that when you have those times of questioning, if you don't have that foundation and you don't have other people that are speaking biblical truth to you, it's really easy to walk away from that, or it could be. But because I had people in my life that no matter how I was living, they still loved on me and still kept trying to instill these biblical principles in me. As a result of that, I think that that's helped me. It helps me now when I am doing the work that I'm called to do as a pastor, that it's okay for you to question what's going on. I tell people all the time, God's big enough to handle your questions. And when my first wife died, I remember saying to myself at some point, I am never going to get the answer to the why question. And I have to be okay with that. And I did. And that was a turning point for me that, okay, since I know I'm not going to get the answer, I could be stuck here and waiting for an answer that I might never get, or I can trust God and keep going. And I'm so thankful that I chose that route because of the lessons that he's taught me along the way.
That's good. The idea of kind of letting go of the why, that's really huge. That's really good.
Yeah.
Well, even if you got an answer, would it be good enough?
Right.
Yeah,
it's not going to bring her back.
Yeah.
No.
So, yeah.
It's just a matter of trust at some point. You got to,
Exactly.
trust that God knows better than you.
Right.
And oh, wow. That's very cool.
Yeah.
All right. So I think you mentioned, in your early 20s, you pivoted toward ministry. Did I get that right?
Not at first. So I was playing college baseball and got hurt. And I thought, I had to go to physical therapy over the summer. And I looked around and thought, I could do this for a living and I could make pretty good money doing it. And that was kind of my goal there. And then I went through that and was taking prerequisites, and I had gotten married because the playing career was over, and we moved out of town. And then you start to hit real life as a result of that. And so then, that I was at a really low point, just trying to figure things out. I was just about to get ready to apply for a physical therapy school. And that's when God started to really deal with me and called me into ministry. And so that just completely shifted gears for me, and talked with my pastor, who was also my father-in-law, and explained it to him. He had been a pastor. He's been in pastoring for over 50 years now. And so he was right there to give me great advice, to link me up with some other leaders in our denomination and the church that we were part of. And then that's kind of how I started down that path, without a Bible degree, without seminary. I just kind of started and went on staff. The way we did it in that movement was that they put you on staff at a church, and that guy was mentoring you and bringing you along. And so made a lot of mistakes in the early days, still do, right? We all do. But I look back and go, I just, God bless Doug Birch for sticking with me, and I stayed there a year, and then I went on to pastor on my own. But so it was I hate to say later in life, because it was late 20s, but it wasn't what I originally intended to do.
Okay.
How did you know that God was calling you into ministry?
That's a great question. It was a time when we were struggling in our marriage in the early days. And I just remember being in a church where I reached a point where I said, I can't do this anymore. I can't make the changes that she's asking me to make and become the man that she's asking me to be on my own. I'd do great for a couple of weeks, maybe, if I made it that long, and then I go right back into it. And that was about the time, it was the mid-90s. There was a ministry called Promise Keepers that was up and coming then, and a men's ministry where they had stadium events. Like I went to one where the Jacksonville Jaguars play, where the Tampa Bay Buccaneers play. They would fill these stadiums and have Christian speakers and worship, and it was all men. And when you sit in a stadium with 70,000 men and they're all praising God, and all of the sermons are directed at helping you be a godly man and a godly husband and a godly father, I needed that, and I soaked every bit of it up. And so soon after that, I just started to, that's when I immersed myself in things like a devotional time. And I think I was asked to be an elder at our church at that point. And so just some things like that. And then I started to feel like God was just calling me, like I couldn't get away from it. That no matter where I went, no matter what I did, I was still feeling like and getting the sense of him saying, Mike, I'm trying to get your attention. Mm-hmm. I have a desire for you. I have a job for you to do, something that I've created you to do. And then you start to realize that, and the more you pray and you talk with people, and then you would see people would come up to me and just say, hey, have you ever thought about being a pastor, or they would just flat out ask me if I was. Well, no, I'm actually praying, and I'm talking people, I'm walking into Publix, into the grocery store, and a lady asks me that one day, out of the blue. No idea who she was, never seen her again in my life.
Wow.
And I say, I am actually praying about that right now. And, then you would just get these affirmations and these confirmations. And so things like that. And then when you start feeling that and you talk with somebody about it, thankfully, the people that I talked to didn't say, you're crazy or you should never do that. I mean, the one was my father-in-law, and he was a pastor himself. And so he had every chance and every opportunity to say, don't do it.
Right.
Don't do it. But he didn't. He said, well, if God's calling you, then you can't get away from that if you want to be obedient. And so let me help you take these steps. And so then we talked about that. And then so I helped start a men's group at our church. They sent me to a training for that, and we started it. And then soon after that, there was a nursing home in the area that needed someone to do a church service on Sunday afternoon for their residents. And I remember this. There were 6 people that would come, and 3 of them stayed awake the whole time. and there was this lady, Faith, and she would come up to me every time. And I would do this twice a month, and she would say, he was here talking about God. And I go, how do you even know that? You weren't even awake, And so things like that, just the preparing. And then soon after that, there was a gentleman in our church that said, hey, I'm going up north for the summer, as that happens in Florida here a lot, and I need somebody to step in for a jail ministry. Are you interested? And I said, well, I don't know. Let me talk with my wife. When is it? Friday night? I said, yeah, let me definitely talk with my wife. And she said, absolutely, I think you should do this. So I did. And I went into the jail cell every Friday night for 3 months. And I started to see there were like 12 to 24 guys that could come out and come to the service. And I started to notice some of these same guys coming out every time. And I thought, wow, I must really be great at this.
Oh, no.
Now I look back and I realize they just want to get out of their cell for an hour.
Maybe not. You don't know.
Maybe not. They kept coming back. And I remember one night I spoke on the life of Moses, that a simple man can do a simple thing in a simple way. How I remember that, I don't know, but that was the sermon. And it was all about the calling of Moses. And that was really what I was going through at the time. And so it just was things like that. And every week I would prepare these sermons. And then I remember that night that God said, that's what I have for you. That's what I want you to do. So that kind of started that process. And, over the years, that calling doesn't go away. There was a time after about 13 years of ministry where we were just dog tired. I was burned out. I had hit a wall and needed a break. And so we left, and we were at small churches where I was the only pastor. So not the lead or the worship or the ministry development or the connections pastor. I was the only pastor. And that kind of took a toll on our family. So I resigned and worked in the nonprofit world for about 6 years. And you and I did some work together actually during that time period. And so that's when we started coming to High Point Church. And I just said, I don't want to do anything. I don't want to teach anything. I just want to be in church, sit next to my wife for the first time in 13 years because I was always up preaching. And they said, yeah, that's fine. Come on in. And so they let me do that for a while. And then God starts to nudge you a little bit. And you know it because you just get this feeling and you can't get away from it. Like keeps you awake at night. You wake up first thing in the morning thinking about it. And you're going, oh, we're going down this road again. But I know that because God's calling me to do that, I know that he's going to equip me to do that. And I want to be obedient because the life without that, the life that says no to him is not a life of blessing that you want to experience. And so the calling doesn't stop. It just kind of changes how you fulfill that calling. And that's what I've noticed in this is my 26th year of ministry now, that, wow. The calling is still there to do what God is telling me to do. The assignment has changed over the years at different times. Even here at this church, I'm not in the same role that I was when I first came in. And that's expanded and changed and shifted, but it's all part of doing what God is asking me to do.
When you say calling, then what would you say the calling is? So if it's not just a pastor, can you expand on that?
I think it is to pastor people. That's what my calling is, just the same as my wife is a teacher. I think she's called to be a high school teacher. Some people are called to work in the mental health field or, wherever it is. You can be called to serve in whatever area God has sent you to. And if you're saying yes to him, he's going to get you into that role. I think that the calling is just something that I was thinking about this today. I was on my way back home from this pastor's meeting in Orlando and was praying about someone and just asking God to do something in their life. And for this person I'm praying for, they've come from a real far way off they had turned away from God for many years and walked just about as far away as you can. And now they've come back. And so I'm asking God to do, this came to my mind, to do an Ephesians 2 work in their life. And that's where you read about, Paul writes about this in Ephesians 2, where you used to be this way. You were dead in your transgressions and your sins, but now I've brought you back and now you've been saved. And this isn't something you can do on your own. It's not something that you can boast about. It's a gift of God. And then he says that you were created to be a masterpiece and that God has created these things in advance for you to do. So the way I see that is he's done things when he created you and put you in your mother's womb. There was a plan for your life and my life. And God knows that, being all knowing and the creator. And so when he does these things, he's putting them in you. And as you grow and mature, you start to hear the voice of God about what it is that he is asking you to do, what he's calling you to do. And you do that for the rest of your life. That's the way that I see it. And then how you do that may change from here or there, depending on where you're at and what you're going through.
Yeah, so maybe the calling is to serve God. Maybe that's the calling for all of us, right? To serve God and his kingdom in some way. And, for you more specifically, it's as a pastor. And then from there, it gets even more specific to the role as a pastor and the areas of ministry that you're working on. That's
sure.
Very interesting.
And Ephesians also talks about that he called some to be pastors and evangelists and teachers, and there's different roles there. And then you read throughout the New Testament, there's different gifts. If your gift is leadership, use that. If it's mercy, use that. Whatever that is. And so I just think that that's it, that the calling is for us to say yes to God, to whatever area it is that he's sending you to. And man, if you'll do that, you'll experience so many amazing things. Yes, there will be opposition because we live in a world where there's an enemy fighting against that. But we also can be focused on the fact that he's on our side and he's doing the work in us and through us.
Yeah.
I guess I'm kind of curious, like being a pastor is certainly not a bad thing. No, it's challenging. I know it has its own challenges.
Yeah.
It's not a bad thing though. So like if someone's growing up and they're like, oh, I'm going to be a pastor one day, it doesn't sound bad. So if you had, if there's a listener that maybe thinks they want to be a pastor, they're not sure if it's a calling or not, how could they distinguish, since it's not a bad goal, how do they distinguish that they're really hearing the voice of God in that it's God directing their feet and not their brain?
Yeah, I think that's good. I think that's where you can get around some other people and ask them, hey, I'm feeling like God is telling me to do this. And I always say, I read this in Henry Blackaby wrote this 30 or 40 years ago, that when God speaks to you, he confirms it through his people, through his word, and through his spirit. And, so get around some people that can direct you, that can pray with you about that. You read like the Old Testament where I think it was Samuel, right? Where God's calling Samuel. And he goes to Eli the priest, and 3 or 4 times Eli's like, I didn't call you. Go back to sleep. It's the middle of the night. Leave me alone. I'm tired. And then finally Eli realizes, oh, God's calling him. And then he says, okay, Samuel, the next time that happens, I want you to say, speak, Lord, for your servant's listening. And so I think that we've got to be open to what it is that God wants to say to us. This is where it goes back to like when I grew up in all those churches and people are teaching me the word, even though I'm not embracing it and living it out, I knew what it meant to hear the voice of God, because I said no to him a lot back then. And, so I knew what that meant when God was speaking to me. So get in a Bible-believing church, first of all, that's going to teach you God is present, he is active, and he is speaking. And so then it comes down to, well, how do you get to know each other so that you can hear his voice in a powerful way? And so talk with someone, talk with your pastor, talk with people in a group of men or women that you're, if you're in a small group, or if there's another believer at your job, talk with somebody like that and see what they say. And then just start listening, start asking God to show you, I feel like you're saying this to me. Is that the case? And then wait to listen for his voice. That's the other thing. I think when you start asking God to do that, he's going to answer. We've got to slow down long enough to listen. And so if someone is experiencing that and they're wrestling with a calling, sometimes we tell people that are feeling that leading, well, if you can do anything else, do it. Mm-hmm. Because it is a high calling. Mm-hmm. James 3 talks about that, those of us that teach, those of us that are called to be pastors have a higher standard, and they're going to be judged more strictly. So there is a lot of responsibility that comes with that. But it is a great thing to be a part of, because I've gotten to see God do so many incredible things in my life and in the lives of others. Mm-hmm. So even just seeing you two, get married and the great coffee we had that day when we celebrated, those kinds of things. But that was God working in your lives. Mm-hmm. And that's the part that I love being a part of here. I love to see other people have that light bulb moment where they have heard from God. And now it's about, well, what do I do now that I've heard this?
Okay. Yeah. So you mentioned kind of just that, there's a responsibility, mm-hmm. but there's also some perks that go along with it, and just kind of seeing God work in the lives of his people. So is there anything else you can add to that? Like any other things you love about being a pastor that you haven't mentioned already? In the last few years, I've been involved in a recovery ministry. We have Celebrate Recovery here at our church. And when I first started in it, I thought it was just because it was a new ministry we were starting at church. Then I got into it and I realized, oh, wait, I need this as well. Mm-hmm. And so what's happened is God has brought a lot of freedom in my life that wasn't there before. I'm stronger. I'm more confident with a lot of the things that he's brought me through. And so that's one of the joys that I have now, is to not only see the light bulb moment when people get it, but to see them living on the other side of that, experiencing his blessing, his freedom that he wants for all of us, if we'll just say yes to him. If we'll just answer that call and do what it is that he's asking us to do, there's a whole lot of great, amazing things that happen as a result of that. How as time has gone on, in the different phases of your life, how has life changed in the current phase that you're in right now?
I think we're just in a place, I was talking about this earlier when we were talking about moving into this new house. We're just in a place of enjoying where God's brought us. We say, and I'm repeating myself, that at least once a day, one of us says to each other, my wife and I love our house. I'm so grateful for where I'm at. And that's one of the things that I'm enjoying about life now. Now I'm starting to see our children as adults most of the time, and where they are having the same kind of light bulb moments that I talked about that I had years ago. And I'm seeing them start to follow their calling. And, whether that's in real estate or in the financial world or teaching school, or one's in ministry and, a couple of others are in education, whatever role it is, they're doing exactly what God's told them to do. And I say to them, man, I wish I was asking that at your age. I wish that when I was 20, I was asking God, what is it you want to do with my life? Would have saved me a lot of heartache. And so that's one of the things that I'm enjoying as well, is seeing our children embrace their faith and start to live that out also. Because there's this legacy part of it, right? That God has not only called me to do something, but he's called me to be a husband and a father and someday a grandfather. And so if I have all of these people that follow what we do here at church, and my own kids aren't doing it, well, then that is something's missing there. Mm-hmm. And so seeing them come alive in Christ now has been really encouraging and exciting to see.
Very cool. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's something I think about a lot with our kids is, they're getting older, and I'm trying to, pour into them. We're trying to pour into them as much as we can, read our Bible with them, and just do as much of it we can. But, there's a point where, you got to have to kind of let off of the wheel, so to speak. And how have you found that transition going from the one when you have to let go of control like that?
I wish somebody had told us that parenting adult children was going to be easier, but because it's not. So you think it is because they're on their own and you're not having to tell them, get up out of bed, tie your shoes, do your laundry this week, whatever it is. But now there's the problems are kind of elevated. Not problems, but, questions and things that you want to see happen. And you just can't control how they're going to do that. I don't have a control over, are they going to get up and go to church if they live in a different city or state? Are they going to love their wife the way Jesus calls them to? Is those kinds of things. When they have kids, are they going to raise them up in the instruction and training of the Lord the way that we tried to? And then I hope that they don't make the same mistakes that I did when I was raising them. And there's all the things that we're facing now. And, and I'm thankful for it because we have 2 of our kids live in our neighborhood, in this new neighborhood, and one lives right next door to us. And so I'm enjoying getting to spend more time with them. And only one is not living in this area. And like I said, he's pastoring down in South Florida. So, but we talk regularly. And so it's been really amazing just to see the men and women that they're becoming in their faith. And so that's the part that I'm really excited to see what happens next.
Yeah. It's kind of like, the stakes are different now, and they're little, you got to worry about them falling and hurting themselves or something. But now, if they're adults and
just blow their lives up.
Yeah.
I was going to say those falls hurt a lot more now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think you've kind of circled around this idea of like kind of giving God your life.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of mentioned that. I think you talked about your life and watching, your kids give their lives to God. What, that I think when you're saved, right, they say that, you give your heart to God, right? And but what does it look different to give your heart to God compared to giving him your life?
I think so. I think there's a distinction there, and theologians have argued about this for hundreds of years. Does that happen at the same time? Is it a second work of grace? I can tell you what happened to me is that I got saved at a young age and walked away from that. I sure wouldn't have wanted to meet the Lord during those years. I'm thankful in his grace and mercy that I didn't. But I do know that at some point in my mid-20s, as I've already talked about, he did something powerful. And then he just keeps doing that. And so I think that's just the case, that it really comes down to giving him your heart and then giving him your life. And when you give him your life, it's like there's different areas of your life that you give. So you give this and you give this, and maybe you give your marriage to him, and then you give your finances to him, and then you give your kids to him, and then you give your hurts to him. Could you do those at the same time? Yes, but sometimes it just might be others. We've lived in our house 5 months now, and the garage is still not unpacked. But that's an area where we still have some improvement to make. And I think our spiritual life is the same. Living room looks great. It's got the new couch and the rug and the entertainment center. And I think we need a bigger TV because we only have a 75-inch because football season's coming again soon.
Oh, so you can watch Alabama lose harder?
Probably so. But, so some areas of the house look great. But then there's other areas where they just still need improvement. And I think our lives are the same way. C.S. Lewis talked about that a little bit in Mere Christianity, about that there's different halls and rooms that you go in, and, be kind to people that are in different rooms. I never forgot that. So I just think that there's still work that he wants to do. And as long as we are here and alive and breathing, there's still work for him to do in us and through us.
I guess I'm kind of thinking like God's like the heartbeat, and he's pushing the blood through the veins out into the different parts of the body to make it work. But they're kind of, maybe some of them are a little clogged, and he's having to work through them to like get it really rolling.
That's good. Yeah. I've never thought of it that way.
Maybe it's a little different. I don't know. The vein reference is weird, but that's where I was like, maybe that's what it is, because we're kind of like, I feel like I keep spinning around this idea, but it's like, growing up in the church, we were always told like once saved, always saved, which I don't disagree with. But I think everyone has this concept of like when you're saved, you're perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And we're so not, because if we were, well, why would we even need God?
Right. Because we'd have it all figured out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's like we really have to like change this perspective. And maybe over the years, I think I've seen the church kind of move more towards that perspective where it's like, okay, you're not just saved at the altar and everything is perfect and you're great. It is really a working process. That's where that relationship is, because definitely like I think of like a marriage relationship, like things are not perfect. We have to work at them and we work in different areas of it. So it's the same when you think about that relationally with God. There are different aspects of that relationship you're working on. I'm working on giving trust in this area. I'm working on sacrificing this part, doing this, but it's always an active, conscious effort. And then maybe there are seasons where you're not so conscious and you backslide a little bit and you're like, oh, wait a minute, that's not right. That's not what I'm supposed to be doing. So I don't.
Yeah, I think, there are times, since I've become a Christian where, I like I mentioned earlier, like questioning my salvation, like if I was really a Christian, I'd be, better at reading my Bible. If I was really a Christian, I'd be praying, more often the way I should. And, but like I said, looking back over my life, I can see the progress I've made and I can see that, of course, it's, I say the progress I've made, but it's, the progress God has made in me.
Right. Sure.
So it's, and, it didn't feel like it at the time, but I can see now, like I am closer. I'm not where I ultimately will be, because it's, I think the big church word is progressive sanctification, right? And so it's the idea that little by little through life's, trials and through the different things we face, God's gonna, make us better and strengthen our faith and make us more like Christ.
Yeah, and I think that's all true, and those are helpful analogies. I tell people all the time too. I don't know where I heard it or where I came up with it or when it first hit me, but that when we get saved, we are as perfect as we can be, but we're not as perfect as we can become.
Mm-hmm.
And in that relationship that I have with God, only one of us is perfect and doesn't need any improvement, and that's so not me.
Mm-hmm.
And so every time that He's summoning me or leading me or calling me to take another step of faith, He's not doing that out of condemnation. He's wanting me to move closer to Him because He loves me that much. And if I'll just embrace that, there's all these things that He wants to do on the way to that. And so, you mentioned marriage, right? And so you guys have been married how long now? How long has it been?
A little over a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and we had some conversations. I'm not going to disclose anything. Don't worry.
No.
But the point is that when we're in a marital relationship, neither one of us are perfect.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not. Lana isn't. Neither are you two. But we're striving to become better at being there for the other person.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the whole goal. And yeah, there's challenges and we've got to work through things sometimes and conflict, and we've got to talk and be there for each other, and we've got to support each other and love each other, all the things that the Bible tells us to do. And if we'll just read the book, we'll learn a lot about that there is this God that loves us so much. For God so loved the world. He so loved me and you and you. And in doing that, He wants us to move ever closer to Him and become more like Him in the process. That's the goal.
Mm-hmm.
And, He has offered us the way to do that through His Son, Jesus, and through the Holy Spirit working in us. And so the whole idea of perfecting us is not so I can look down at other people and go, why can't you get it together? Look how great I am. But what you can do is He can then use you to reach back and pull other people and help them come closer to Him. And so that's what I love about ministry and about being able to talk about things like this, because you really get the opportunity to speak into people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
And you really get the opportunity to celebrate when they take those steps of faith. Man, when you get people to and you get to see them follow God in a whole new way, that's the best thing ever. Because they're moving in the direction that they're supposed to be, that Almighty God wanted them to move in from the very beginning. And I think that comes down to that giving him your life part. Okay, I'm going to give you this part of my life, and 5 years from now, he's going to ask for more and more and more. And you use the word progressive, Charlie. It really is that, and not in a negative connotation. Now there's like this whole progressive Christianity movement, which says, oh, no, let's question and doubt and debunk everything. This is progressing where I'm actually moving closer to him. That's the sanctification part, where I'm becoming more holy than I was before. I'm becoming more like Christ. And that's really the goal that he's after. So it's about, am I going to feel bad when I mess up? Well, okay, but that should help me run to him. And when I do that, I'm always welcomed back into these loving arms, who forgives me, but will say, okay, don't do that again.
Right.
You know, if you hit your head against the wall 10 times, it's going to start hurting and bleeding. So stop doing that. Instead, move away from the wall, those kinds of things. And so it just comes down to, like we've talked about already so much, hearing his voice and knowing what he wants to do in your life.
Kind of, something that's kind of coming to me as we're talking about this, but like, you know, going back to the marriage example, you know, I think, you know, when Valerie and I can work together to improve our relationship, it kind of improves our ability to enjoy one another.
Right.
And I guess kind of something struck me as you were talking is, you know, as, you know, we give our life more to God, as we give him more of our life, that increases our ability to enjoy him, which really, what else could be better? Like, there's nothing, that's the goal, isn't it? Is to enjoy God ever increasing and forever and ever, just enjoy him more and more and more, because he's infinitely better. And so I don't know. So maybe that's kind of something that struck to me. It's, as you were talking about that, Mike, and kind of giving up those things that are getting in the way so that we can enjoy him more. And so,
right.
Enjoy him instead of like running from him or fighting against him. Although I think sometimes we do have to go through those wrestle moments.
I think, well, yeah. So instead of turning to things that, you know, or maybe trying to control a situation that, you know, the way we think we should, but if we give it over to him, give him more of our life, that lets us appreciate him more, or see his wisdom, or really, you know, find more meaning in him in some way, you know, just deepens that relationship somehow.
I like that.
I think too, because you said, do you mean like when you're not running from him anymore? That's part of it. But there's also this part of, I can still be running to him and things can get better and better. So if I put a number, you know, my relationship with God today is a 6 out of 10. I yelled at 2 people on I-4 this morning, hypothetically.
Was that hypothetical?
Or I didn't get up in time to do the dishes before I left, or whatever it is, you know. But then tomorrow I take some huge steps of faith, and so it's more of an 8 out of 10. So I haven't run from him, but in running to him more, I enjoy that more. My relationship with him grows because of that. So it's there. I think it's both of those. It's not either or. It's both and. You know, I can move away from him and take that step and not, you know, walk in my faith, but like I should. And that certainly impacts and affects the intimacy that I have with God. I can also run to him more than I was before, and that will affect it also. It'll just make it better. And when you use the marital relationship, it works that way too, right? That the closer we get to each other, if Lana and I are each submitting to Christ submitting to each other out of reverence for Christ, she's submitting to him, and so am I. We're both submitting to him, so we're going to move closer together as a couple as a result of that. And I tell married couples that all the time, that's important. It's in the wedding vows, in the sermon, the ceremony that we had for you a year ago, and the one that I just did about a month ago. It's in there because it's so important for us to each focus on that, but then to come together as a couple. So our love for each other grows and deepens. It's the same way with God. And marriage is a picture of our relationship with God, the Bible says. So I think it's important to focus on that.
All right, now we're coming to our tag out segment. Now, this is a time that we are going to kind of give one sentence, one or two, kind of a takeaway from the conversation that we've had with Mike, and then so I'll go, then Valerie will go, and Mike, you can give us our listeners a final encouragement or truth that you want to share. So my tag out kind of came there at the end. I don't know, it's kind of was running through my mind, but the idea of the more I give my life to God, the more of my life that I give to Him, that really gives me is the ability to it increases my ability to enjoy Him. So I kind of like that thought, and I feel like that is, the less I'm trying to control, the more I give God control, and that ultimately will increase my enjoyment of Him.
I think there were lots of nuggets of truth that we got throughout this, and I almost feel like I need an outline, but something I kind of wrote down while we were talking, and I didn't catch the quote 100%, but you were talking about when we get saved, we're as perfect as we can be, but we're not as perfect as God can carry us to. And I know I'm ad-libbing a little bit there, but I find myself circulating around that thought. So that's my tag out for today.
All right.
Okay.
All right, Mike. So what would you like to leave our listeners with as a final encouragement?
Sure. I'll just repeat that. When we get saved, we're as perfect as we can be, but we're not as perfect as we can become. That was the end part of that. I think for me, there is this whole idea you talked about in your tag out statement about enjoying Him. And if I really enjoy my time with God, then I'm not going to go into that stress about, what is He going to say to me today? What is He going to challenge me to do today? What is He going to make me do that I don't want to do? And there's all these negative connotations. The Sermon on the Mount starts in Matthew 5 that the disciples came to Him and He began to teach them. And I think I love that phrase, that verse, because it talks about when somebody is a disciple, it means that they want to follow Jesus. And so they're coming to Him. There's this effort on their part. And then there's a response where He begins to teach them. And if you read the Sermon on the Mount, what He does is just incredible. What Jesus continues to lay out about what it means to follow Him. But there's so much there that I think we miss because we don't enjoy coming to Him and we don't enjoy being taught by Him. But if we trust in His character and in who He is and in how much He loves us and wants the very best for us, then I should want to come to Him. Unless I'm away from Him because of sin, and then I should want to come to Him as quickly as possible and get restored in that. But I should want to come to Him, and I should look forward to what He's going to teach me.
Right.
Because I know who He is and how He feels about me. And so I just think that that's important. And again, no matter what I did, no matter how far away I had strayed, I always believed He loved me. And does that mean He's going to discipline me when I'm away? Sure, that's part of love. Our world doesn't understand that a lot now, but love does do discipline because that's real love. And so I should be wanting to be in His presence on a regular basis. I should be wanting to pray where I submit my request to Him. And I should be wanting to listen to see what He wants to say to me. And I should be wanting to follow Him and do what it is that He's asking me to do. Because no matter what happens, no matter what roads I go down, no matter what hills I have to climb, He's going to be right there with me. So that's kind of what I'm walking away with here as well, to think about how is it that I can enjoy being with Him even more.
Yeah.
I like that.
So,
I do too.
All right. Well, Mike, we appreciate you coming on.
thanks for having me.
Yeah.
This has been fun.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike.
I'm excited for you two to do this.
Our first guest. On
Yes,
the
All
our
right.
first official.
All right. So for you listeners, if today's episode encouraged you, share it with someone who might need it. If you're interested in sharing your testimony with us, you can email us at testimonytagteam@gmail.com. This has been the Testimony Tag Team.
And we're tagging out.